Assalamu alaikum, good evening. Thank you very much for coming to our talk this evening entitled Excellence of the Arabic Language. We're joined today by Jubril Alao, who's one of the board members of the Ibn Jubril Language Institute, which has been running for now, I think, about 15 years. Whose objective is a non-profit organisation. I think their longer-term objective is to really re-establish Arabic as the lingua franca, especially certainly amongst Muslims in the West. And I think it's since its inception about 15 years ago, it's quite a revolutionary approach to Arabic, really designed for people maybe with who are used to the Western educational mindset, but focusing on a very intensive approach. Jubril's been studying Arabic since the inception of the Jubril Institute, so over 10 years, and he's travelled extensively as well in the Middle East to complement his studies as well. By day, he's a teacher at the Institute as well. By day, he is an IT consultant as well, but obviously his passion lies in the Arabic language. I think you probably read the blurb, but just to put it, I think, in context, and perhaps obviously Jubril will elucidate. I think it's generally, in the Muslim tradition, it's generally agreed upon that when, in the Qur'an, when we're told that, Allah took upon himself to preserve the Qur'an, intrinsic to that was the preservation of the Arabic language. And that's within our understanding. And one of the things that certainly a teacher of mine told me once, which is interesting, because obviously there's a lot of translations, not just obviously of the Qur'an, but on much of the literary heritage of the Muslims. But one of the things that I was told is that really, if you use a translation, that's like using a crutch. And you use it because you don't have a choice and maybe you need to get better. But ultimately, if you can, it's not a long-term solution, and one should really strive to learn the Arabic language. So in that context, inshallah, I'll pass over to Jubril. He'll speak for about maybe 35 minutes, inshallah, and then we'll have a break for Maghrib. And then after that, obviously, we'll open up for questions and answers, inshallah. Okay, over to you, Jubril.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah hamda dhatihi bi sifatihi. Thumma salatu wa salamu ala khairil bariyyati. Mudhir ayatihi wa sifatihi. Sayyidina wa habibina Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Muhammad ibn Abdullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima kathira wa ba'd. Okay, so today inshallah we'll attempt to emphasize and to look at the Qur'an and to argue, and inshallah we'll discuss this as well, how intrinsic the Arabic language is to the Qur'an, how necessary it is for you to actually be able to truly appreciate the Qur'an, how you have to learn the Arabic language in order to be able to fully appreciate the Qur'an at an intellectual level, in some cases at a spiritual level, at an emotional level, because the emotive nature of languages is usually lost in translation, and at many different fronts. And inshallah, I hope at the end of this session, what we'll gain will be what we call targheeb in the Arabic language, which is to increase the hope of the people here who haven't learned Arabic yet, or who are still started learning Arabic, to really push them in that journey further, to realize that the Quran is filled with innumerable jewels and treasures that can only be attained through learning the Arabic language. So we'll start. Allah says in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, in Surah Yusuf, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah says, indeed, we have revealed this Qur'an in Arabic. In fact, another way of looking at it, we've revealed it as an Arabic Qur'an. Why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. It says the reason why it's been revealed in Arabic. That is, perhaps as a result of choosing this language above any other language, it will force you to use your intellect. Why is that the case? The Arabic language actually forces you to use your intellect more than most other languages. And how does it do this? For example, the concept of root structure in the Arabic language, right? Which you find in other Semitic languages, where you have a word in the Arabic language, and that word, you cannot just take the meaning from a direct perspective. You have, for example, yudabbir, right, in the Quran, or yatadabbar, for example, right? And you have to then ask yourself, in Arabic language, the concept of using root letters, you look beyond. If you look at the translation of that word, yatadabbaru, for example, it means you see the translation as to think or to ponder. But then in the Arabic language, will force you to say, okay, let's dissect this word. It has 3 root letters, which is da, ba, and ra. These 3 root letters have a concept of meanings. The Arabic language, the structure of it is that when you have a word, when you trace it back to its roots, the roots actually have like a concept of meanings. And dubur usually means the back, right? Then you might ask yourself, what is the relationship between your back and ponder? And you see, I don't think any of you, as you're looking at me, can see my back, right? Which means the level of thinking that Allah intends you to reach with the Arabic, with the Qur'an, with the verse which I'm referring to is where Allah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أفلا يتدبرون القرآن. Do they, and that even the structure in the Arabic language of afala, right? If you translate it in the Arabic language, in English, it says, do they not ponder over the Quran? It loses the urgency of that question. Because afala in the Arabic language is, how dare you not ponder about it, right? It's a serious question as opposed to when you see it in English, it says, do they not ponder, right? And normally, if you were to try to translate things with the emotion that it carries, it doesn't fit because you would almost lose the culture where it's coming from. So, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ, Allah says, do they not really ponder about the Qur'an? And that word that Allah chose for ponder, because there are many words that could be used. You could have said يَتَفَكَّرُ, right? In another verse Allah says, they call me يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, for people that think about other things. But for the Qur'an, Allah chose يَتَدَبَّرُ. That is, He wants you to penetrate beyond what is necessarily apparent. Similarly, as you need to look beyond what you can see to see my back, Allah requires the kind of pondering on the Qur'an that beyond that which is necessarily apparent. And the Arabic language facilitates this. In the Qur'an, for example, and I'm going to explain, for example, if you look at the history of the Qur'an and translation, many of you might not know this, but it was actually regarded as an act of apostasy to translate the Qur'an. Right? In the early days of Islam, it was regarded as an act of apostasy to take the Quran and put it in another language. Why? Because in the Quran, Allah says, would you exchange that which is high for that which is low? And those who knew the Arabic language know that, those who were adept at it at that point, they knew that taking such eloquence and putting it in any other language would lower it. Right? Hence, they felt it was actually an offense to translate the Quran, because you're depriving people of a lot of it, of its meanings. Hence, and some people might say, oh, why, this is quite harsh statement. How can you say that, apostasy is just for translating? I rely on translation, and without translation, I wouldn't know X, Y, Z of the Quran. Well, the analogy I give them is, imagine if your father left inheritance for you, right? And he chose me, a Nigerian, as your lawyer, right? But anyway, chose someone to be me as the caretaker of your will. Okay, and I as the caretaker of your will, of your father's will, I then tell you after his death, and I give you a check of £20 million. That's what your father left for you. He left £20 million for you. How would you feel? A lot of you think, £20 million, that's a lot of money, right? What if you found out 5 years later that he actually left £200 billion, and I gave you 20 million of it? Then you think, where is that Nigerian, right? Right? You will think, how dare he do that to me, right? What did he think he just did, right? He gave me 20 million out of 200 billion, and it made me think I have something of my father's inheritance. Well, you know what? Every single translator does exactly the same thing to you, right? Every single translator takes 20 million and gives you that of the Quran, and you actually think you're reading the Quran. Right? You actually think when you read a translation of the Quran that you're accessing the Quran. No, you're accessing someone else's opinion of what the Quran is. Because the Quran actually speaks to everyone directly. And with the understanding of the language, you will come to meanings which it will continue to give. It's a never-ending gift. And I'll give you some examples to sort of contextualize some of these things. So, in the Quran, Allah says, for example, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. Now when you translate that into the English language, it says, and Allah will not punish them while you're with them, and Allah will not punish them while they're asking for forgiveness. Then you think, well, that sounds okay. But then you've lost something of the nature of the word punish that Allah used. Because in the first part of it, Allah says, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَ. He uses a verb for punishing. Right? And in the Arabic language, you know that when you use a verb, it's connected to time. Right? That is, it's temporary. Right? This punishment that will not come is linked to your presence, Muhammad, in their presence. Right? So you understand from the word that the verb that is used that this is a temporary connotation. It has to do with time. Right? And then the next word, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبَهُم. It's a noun. وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. So Allah tied His not punishing the people to their state of asking for forgiveness to a permanent state that this is me, this is who I am, Al-Ghafur. Right? The one who is extremely forgiven. Sometimes they translate Al-Ghafur as oft forgiven. It's an abuse of that name. The word Ghafir, for example, in the Arabic language, means someone who forgives someone. So, for example, if I forgive you once, I can be called a Ghafir. Or if I do it habitually, I can be called a Ghafir, that do something habitually. If you call someone Ghafur, right, you're saying that person does that action in extreme amounts. Right? In extreme amounts. And Allah didn't stop there with His name. He also called Himself Al-Ghaffar. That is an extreme of an extreme. Right? If you want to have an appreciation of it, it's like someone, if, for example, I'm in this gathering, so one of you decides to throw something at me, think boring, right? Throw something at me. Then I look at the person, I smile, I go, I forgive you. Then I can be called a Ghafir. Right? Let's say not just one person did it, but all of you stand up together, don't do it please, right? And decide to start throwing things at me. Now that's an extreme amount of people, right? An extreme action. And I decide after throwing all of that, I forgive you all. But then imagine if every single time I come here, and I come here 5-6 days a week, right? And every time I come, you all throw it. So that's an extreme action in extreme amounts. That's the name Allah gave Himself, Al-Ghaffar. And you lose that when you translate it to the oft forgiven, the most forgiven. Right? And the Qur'an is littered with another example in the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Mulk. Allah says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا in describing birds, He says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ صَافَّاتٍ وَيَقْبِضْنَ. Right? Do they not see the birds above them, spreading their wings and clasping it? Right? You think, yeah, that seems a good translation. But then you look at the words that are used. Safat is a noun. The word that Allah used to describe the spreading of the wings of birds, it's a noun. And the word that He uses to describe the clasping of the wings is a verb, which means the clasping has to be temporary. And you tell me any birds that can fly like this. Right? So the permanent state of flying, because Allah was describing flying in that verse, has to be safat. Which is what Allah described that, and He uses a noun to describe that. So you lose that beauty of expression when you translate it into the English language. Another one, right? In the Qur'an, Allah speaks in Surah Al-Qadr, He says, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ خَيْرٌ مِنْ أَلْفِ شَهْرٍ. And then Allah then describes, I have to hold myself back in trying to, so first of all, in the Arabic language, if you translate this into English, it says, indeed we revealed it in the night of power. And what will let you know what the night of power is? The night of power is better than 1,000 months. In the Arabic language, right, the style that is used here is called tashwiq, right, where it creates a yearning for what is coming after. So, inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Indeed we revealed it in the night of power. And then it asks a question, right, which is to create yearning in the heart of the person listening to this. And this kind of yearning, if you don't understand the language, you will not really get the kind of thing that's planted in you. It says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. What will let you know what this night of power is? The one who hears that in the Arabic language is already thirsty. What is it? What is it? right? And then the verse comes, Laylatul Qadr khayrun min alf shahr. The night of power is better than 1,000 months. You know, and in the Arabic language, it could have said the night of power is equivalent to X. But it says better than 1,000 months, meaning there is no limit to it in reality. Right? Better than, it's not equivalent to. Right? Which is why some people say equivalent and they give you 83 years. No, the language is khayrun min, better than. Right? And then the part I'm trying to get to is, then it says, تَنَزَّلُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحُ فِيهَا. That the angels descend and the ruh, the spirit, descends in it. Now, that word tanazzal, anyone who understands Arabic will say, wait a minute, there seems to be something missing there. Because the form of that verb should be tatanazzal. Right? Tatanazzal. And then you think, why has the ta been taken off? If you know Balagh and Arabic, you know that when something is taken off, they say in the Arabic language, ziyadatul mabna, ziyadatul ma'na. When you increase the structure of a word, you are increasing the meaning. And when you take away words from it, yadullu ala takhfif. You are showing that there's a grand nature. So tanazzal means for something to descend. So if I were to throw this cup down, which I want, there's some water in it. If I were to throw this cup down, the way it would fall down, I could say tatanazzal. But if I were to cause it to come down with my holding like this, in such a slow, grand way, then that's the only time I can say tanazzal, by removing one ta. And how can you explain that in the English language? You're just saying the angels descend. Right? So you totally lose the rhetorical flourish that is being intended here. Okay? In Surah Al-Kahf, another example of this tanazzal and tatanazzal. In Surah Al-Kahf, in the story of Musa and Khidr, right? In that story, before Musa tells Khidr that you're not going to be able to be patient with me, he said, La tastati', right? He said, La tastati'. The word tastati' means you will not be able to. And then after Musa told him all the hidden meanings behind all the actions, he said, ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ. He removes one tab. Allah, in narrating that, removes one tab. So the first, and when you read both translations, and all the translations I've read, and I've read a few of them in the past, all of them translate tastati' and tastati' as able. But the language doesn't do that. The actual language in the first tastati' says this ability is harder for you. Right? Because it has the full thing. This, your lack of ability to be patient with me when you didn't know the interpretations behind my actions, that is harder. But then the second part where it says, وَلَا مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ, right? The second part, you look at it, you see there's a ta removed from there, which means now it's easier for you to be able to. Right? And that, you lose it in the translation. Right? In the Qur'an as well, in Surah Al-Nahl, when Allah is speaking about the means of transport where Allah created, right? And Allah says He created from you many things, and then He said, وَالْخَيْلَ وَالْبِغَالَ وَالْحَمِيرَ لِتَرْكَبُوهَا وَزِينَةً. That He created horses, mules, donkeys, so that you may ride on it and as an adornment for you. The verses before, Allah talked about خَلَقَ. He created. And then in that part, towards the end, and He says, وَيَخْلُقُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He turns it from the past to imperfect. Imperfect in the Arabic language is either something that's happening in the present or something that will continue to happen in the future. That is, He's creating means of transport you don't even know about. Right? So people 1,400 years ago, if you told them there's going to be a Porsche that will be able to take you from here to 0 to 60 in how many seconds? I don't know. But anyway, they'll be able to move that quick. They'll be like, what kind of horse is that? Right? But in the Qur'an, it says in the Qur'an, وَيَخْلُقُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. The imperfect is used here to say that this is something that will continually happen. Right? وَيَخْلُقُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And there's so many aspects of that. Another thing to consider is, when the Qur'an was revealed, the Arabs had reached a peak in the utilization of the language. They had reached such a level where, I tell you, when they wanted to have, sometimes a poem would lead to wars. A poem. Someone would write poetry about the leader of a people such that the people will have to change their name. Right? So for example, someone writes a poem about Nigerians, right? You would have to change that country's name, that we're no longer Nigerians, we're now, okay, we won't change Nigerians anyway, but back in the days, you'd write a poem and the people would actually change their name because it's now on the tongue of everyone and because of the eloquence contained within it, right? So the Qur'an came at such a time where not only that, they had a yearly competition, right? Whereby in Jazirat al-Arab, in the Arab Peninsula, they had yearly competition to find the most eloquent poet. And the one that won, they knew what eloquence was. They had the ability to look at lines of poetry or lines of eloquence and say, this is more eloquent than that. Okay? So the ones that won were written in gold and hung up where? In the Kaaba, as something worthy of worship, of that kind of reverence. Okay? Now, when the Qur'an was revealed, the Qur'an also was revealed at the time when they reached that level. The Arabic language also had different styles of the Arabic language. There was the style of the poet, which was known. The beats that came with it, the length and the beauty, all of that was known. There was a style of the fortune teller, which was known. There was a style of the soothsayer. There was a style of the magician, which in order for you to save yourself from, you literally have to cover your ears in what the magician was saying. Right? There was a style of the eloquent madman. Right? The eloquent majnoon. If you go and read some of Majnun Layla's poems, you'll see what I'm talking about. And they all had the distinct styles. When the Qur'an came, it did not fit into any of the styles that existed. Which meant they had no frame of reference to compare with anything. One of the stories that really brings this out, and if you've heard it before, bear with me. My students would have heard this a few times. One of my favorite stories about the Qur'an, effect of the Qur'an, is the story of Walid bin Mughira. Walid bin Mughira was considered as he was one of the chiefs of the Arabs, one of the leaders of the Arabs, and was considered to be one of the most eloquent of the Arabs. He was so much, because of his position, he was chosen to go to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and convince him to leave this call of his. So he went to him and he said, "Ya Muhammad, you've called our fathers stupid. You have separated between father and child. You've broken down our families. You've caused chaos in our societies. If what is wrong with you is if you're mentally ill, we'll get a doctor for you and we'll heal you with our own money. If you want money, we will gather all our money and make you the richest Arab. Right? If you want position, a high position, we will make you the king of Mecca. Right? If you want marriage, we will look for the most beautiful woman in Mecca and give it to you as a wife. Right? Whatever you want, drop this call. Right? The Prophet Muhammad didn't interrupt him, by the way. Imagine someone offering you such preposterous nonsense. Right? And, the Prophet Muhammad, with his adab, right? He didn't interrupt him. And even after he finished, he said to him, Hal faraghta ya Abul Walid? Have you finished? Then Walid bin Mughira said, yes, I've finished. He said, Fasma' ma 'indi. Now hear what's with me. Right? And what did he recite? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. He recited the following verses. Hameen tanzilun minar rahmanir rahim. Kitabun fussilat ayatuhu Qur'anan Arabiyyan liqawmin ya'qilun. He recited up to 40 verses, but because of time I won't be able to do that. Right? So he recited 40 verses. Now, I want you to now put yourself in Walid bin Mughira's shoes for a second. Imagine yourself to be one of the most eloquent in your language. Right? One of the most eloquent in your language. And this guy, this person, you've come here to convince him to stop this new message he's brought. And the first two letters he utters throws you into a state of absolute ignorance. Hameen. What is that? He couldn't compare that to anything he'd heard before. There was no previous time like that. He thought, what is that? And in his state of, what is that? What is that? Allah responds straight to him. Tanzilun minar rahmanir rahim. The word tanzilun in the Arabic language is indefinite. Meaning, even though the translation is a revelation, in the Arabic language, when Arabs hear something indefinite, they know that they don't know the reality of that thing. Right? Because something, Allah could have said, at-tanzilu, the revelation. Right? Which he did in another part for another reason where he says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ. He points to a book at you, but let's not do that now. But anyway, so he said, تَنزِيلٌ مِنَ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. This is a revelation from Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now, he knew who Ar-Rahman was. He knew who Ar-Rahim was. But this Tanzeel, right, this revelation, it threw him into more, some more yearning for, what is this? What is this? And then he continues to describe it. كِتَابٌ فُصِّلَتْ آيَاتُهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. He says, this is a book, right? Another way of throwing him into that. And of course, these verses were revealed before him, right? But now imagine what these verses that Allah chose to let His Prophet tell him. Imagine what they're doing to this eloquent Arab who was one of the most eloquent of them. It says a book that its signs have been made clear, an Arabic book. The person who thinks, right, it's an Arabic book. He knows these words, he knows qaf, he knows ya, he knows this. But this, the way this is put together, it threw him into a total state of bewilderment. Right? And when he continued reciting, and I really wish I could go further, but just for the sake of it, he continued reciting it until he reached a point where he said, and if they do not desist, then warn them of the punishment that came to the people of Ad and Thamud. Now, because of the way that verse is structured in the Arabic language, right, he felt as if the punishment was coming right there. You know what he did? He closed the mouth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He closed his mouth. He said, stop. And Shabtuka Rahm, I beg you by family bonds, by womb tie, don't do this. The Prophet Muhammad didn't do anything. He was just speaking, right? And what did Walid bin Mughira have? He didn't have Iman. In fact, he didn't die. He didn't have faith. In fact, he didn't die as a Muslim. But he had the Arabic language. And that caused him to have that effect. And then he continued reciting, and when he got to the verse of prostration, you know what he did? He prostrated. Right? That was through what? Just the Arabic language. And then when he got back, another effect of the Arabic language, when he went back to his people, you know what the first thing they said to him was? Ya Abul Walid, لَقَدْ رَجَعْتَ بِوَجْهٍ لَمْ تَذْهَبْ بِهِ. You've come back with a face that you did not leave with. So his face was physically, visibly changed by the Qur'an. Because he had what? The Arabic language. Right? Because he knew what this was. And when they said that to him, they said to him, so what should we do to him? Right? When they said that to him, that you've come back with a face we've not come back with, he said, what's wrong with you? He said, Wallahi laqad sami'tu kalaman lam asma' mithlahu qatt. That I have heard something, I've heard a speech that I've not heard anything like it before. And then on the spot, this is how you want to know how eloquent he is, on the spot he composed a few lines of poetry, which he says, Wallahi innahu lahalawa. Indeed, by Allah, this is very sweet. Wa inna alayhi laqalawa. And anyone who listens to it has to follow it. Right? And he continues to say, I don't know, it's 5 lines per because of time, but he basically composed a few lines of poetry expressing what he felt. That it says, whoever tries, anything that tries to go above the Qur'an will bring it down, and anything that tries to creep underneath it to oppose it, it will crush it. Right? That was what someone who eventually, by the way, died as a non-Muslim, right? Because he knew of the eloquent force that this words came with. He said, this is not, and he said, this is not human. And then they said, Abu Walid, you've changed, you've apostated, you've gone against the religions of your forefathers. He said, well, I have not done that. Right? And then they said, well, this is just poetry, they said. He said, I know every single style of poetry. I know the rhythms, I know the length, I know all of the styles of poetry. This is definitely not poetry. Then he said, then this is fortune telling. He said, I know all the styles of fortune telling. This is not fortune telling. They said, then it's magic. He said, we know all the styles of magic that exist. This is not magic. Right? Then he said, then he's a madman. He said, we know all the styles of madmen. and all the styles of eloquence. This is not the word of a mad person. Then they said, then what is it? He said, this is not the word of a human being. Ma hada qawlul bashar, he said. This is not the word of a human. Now, he said this because of what he had of the Arabic language. Right? And then eventually they said, so what should we do to him? He said, leave him alone. That if he's successful, then his success will be your success. Then if others kill him because he's unsuccessful, then that will be what you want. But leave him alone. Right? And they said, no, we shall not leave him alone. Then eventually they forced him until eventually he said, let me sleep over it in a night. Next morning they came to him. He said, we know what we're going to say. We're going to say Muhammad is a magician that his words cause you to turn away from your parents and break family ties. So what we're going to do, whenever he speaks, we have to do this. Right? We have to cover our ears. Because they knew that, and you know what they used to do, by the way? They would cover their ears in public, and some of them in private at night, they would go and hide, and when they would listen, they would go and hide and listen to the Qur'an at night. Because it had so much beauty. Right? So much beauty in the light. Some of them didn't eventually accept Islam, but yet they were so moved by what they heard that they knew that this was beyond this world. Okay? Another example of this, right? Okay. Another example of this is this. Now, this meaning I'm going to, mention. This you won't find in tafsir. This is just due to tadabbur that Allah asks us to do. In the Qur'an, Allah says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu." Surat al-Hashr. No, Surat al-Saf. Allah says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kunu ansar Allah." O you who believe, be helpers of Allah. كما قال عيسى بن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. You look at the word says, translation is, O you who believe, be helpers of God. Like Jesus said to these children of, like Jesus said to the children of Israel, who will be my helpers in Allah? Who will be my helpers in Allah's cause? And the Hawariyun, his disciples said, we are Allah's helpers. Now, in English, you see the word helpers, helpers, helpers. In the Arabic language, you look at the word ansar, kunu ansar Allahi. An Arabic student will tell you, the word ansara is mansub at first. Next, he says, man ansari ila Allah. An Arabic student will tell you that word is marfu'un, and I'm going to explain what I'm saying by the way soon. That word is marfu'un, but it looks majroor. Right? And then the third part, nahnu ansarullah. That word is marfu'un, and it looks marfu'un. Now let's look at these words that I've used. The first one, kunu ansar, the word mansub in the Arabic language means erect, associated with something straight, literal meaning. And grammatically it can mean accusative. So the first verse, Allah says, it's telling them, be helpers of Allah, that is, stand strong. Right? Be this. Let this be your state, that you're erect, you're strong, you're straightforward. You're someone who is you see, this is the thing. I have this meaning in Arabic. It's very difficult to find the right words to put in English. But anyway, the first meaning will be to be very strong and to be straightforward and to be properly built up. Then the next part, in the Arabic language, the word marfu'un means raised, right? And the word majrurun means dragged. Then the next word that Allah uses for helpers, if you want to understand how the real helpers of God should be, He says the word looks as if it's dragged, right? However, in reality, it's raised. And that is how a true helper of God should be. He should be humble on the outer, right? But in reality, by virtue of the Lord he worships, he is great in his Lord's sight. But on the outer, he should look and remain humble. You can't see it, you can't understand this if you don't understand the language and what the grammar is doing there, right? And then the last part, that is, and eventually, for those who are helpers of Allah, there would be marfu'un, they will be raised, and their raised status will eventually become apparent either in this world or in the hereafter. Right? How would you understand that or come to such meanings if you don't understand the language itself? right? That is what the Arabic language is to the Qur'an. There are a few things I've written here again, which is, I mean, I can't overestimate, I've tried to be, because of time, I've tried to summarize these things, but in short, I tell you from direct experience of having relied on translations in the past, and I wasn't born an Arab, I'm not an Arab, I learned Arabic myself from scratch, like, you know, most people, like a lot of you can do as well, inshallah. And I can tell you from coming from that world of reading translations and then reading the Arabic language, if not because I understand that the translators are trying to do a service, I feel like that person who has been written a check for 20 million, whereas he knows that he's been deprived of 280 whatever billion, okay? My maths is not good on Friday nights. But who thinks he's been deprived of that amount compared to the 20 million that he's been given? So I say to everyone, inshallah, I hope this short session, of course there'll be questions and answers after, I hope this short session has given you a little taster. Trust me when I say this, the Qur'an is filled with these jewels. It's filled with it. Which is why Arabs don't argue anymore about what the most eloquent book in their language is. There's no argument. You pick it up, and they say the Qur'an, Al-Qur'an yufassaru, thumma yub'athu yawm al-qiyamati ka'annahu lam yufassar. That the Qur'an will be explained and explained, new meanings will come out, and then on the day of judgment, you bring out the Qur'an, and it will be as if nobody has ever touched it. Right? That is the Qur'an. You might look at it, you might just place it on your shelf and not necessarily open it, but I guarantee you, once you know the language, and you understand the intricacies of the language, and you have the tools to be able to taste the Qur'an, you will find it difficult to stop reading it. You would physically have to force yourself to stop reading it because you want to maintain a certain amount of consistency. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.
I just want to ask, why should we learn Arabic through Ibn Jubril?
Okay. By the way, are you part of the job? It's like are you like planted?
Oh, he's going to ask a question.
It's just like,
No, I wanted to ask a question.
oh, okay, so okay, just to check.
It's not a mold.
It's not plant, okay, go on.
I can say I don't know him for a fact, but so I will know your opinion afterwards. So just a quick, why Ibn Jubril? In my experience of seeing Arabic language taught over the past 10 years, I strongly, personally, and I stress the word personally, believe that the Ibn Jubril Institute has really cracked how to teach Arabic to English-speaking people. In my experience of that, I've not seen any other institute, and I've seen all this. I'm not going to mention names, but I have had other institutes' teachers tell me, we know you guys are the best in language. And this, I believe Ibn Jubril is the standard as far as how a language should be taught, and especially how the Arabic language should be taught. Ibn Jubril, that's an emotive statement. Facts-wise, Ibn Jubril teaches Arabic in such a way that uses both the classical method, which is very much heavily based on memorizing. So you have a lot of drills that Ibn Jubril teaches you that you have to memorize, and the students know it's one of the morning rituals of Ibn Jubril that you go through a set of drills at the beginning of the class. Then it also uses the Western methodology of making a huge focus on just understanding things and using examples and things like that, which Ibn Jubril combines both very well, in my opinion. And also, 95% of Ibn Jubril teachers had to learn Arabic from scratch, right? I am an example of that. I was an Ibn Jubril student myself. 15 years ago, I didn't know, I couldn't, if you say to me, Anta Himarun, I'll probably smile, because I don't know what you're saying. But Anta Himarun means you're a donkey, by the way. I'll probably smile, but now, having gone through that experience of actually learning the language, I can tell you that Ibn Jubril, because of the fact that most of the teachers had to learn it, they can empathize with the journey that the students is going through. They can empathize with them, and they can take them, because they've gone through a similar journey, basically. And finally, I would tell you now, Ibn Jubril is not necessarily for everybody, it's not for the faint-hearted, it's an intensive language course. You're basically learning in 15 classes what you would have learned in a year at an institute. Okay? So it's not for everybody, it's not suited for everybody, it's suited for those people who, and I have seen a wide range of people, whether it is with people who are, who have very high grades in their school, and people with not necessarily those high grades, and I've seen a very wide range of people do very well in the Arabic language, because it's not necessarily always due to how intelligent you are. The language, Allah says in the Quran, I'm going to stop here, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have facilitated the Quran as a reminder. Who is it that will take it and take heed? And the Mufassirun said, مِن تَيْسِيرِ الْقُرْآن تَيْسِيرُ اللُّغَةِ. That from the facilitation of the Quran is the facilitation of its language. And Allah has facilitated this for those who seek it. So why Ibn Jabal, in my experience, it's the best institute in the United Kingdom that I know of, that I've seen, that is out there in teaching Arabic language to English speakers. The downside of Ibn Jabal, it's very intensive, right? If you cannot hack the intensity, something we're actually a part of the board of Ibn Jabal, some of the things we're looking to in the near future is having some Ibn Jabal students, some Ibn Jabal loyalists, might not like this, but it's having less intensive courses in the future, right? Because believe me, Ibn Jabal, if you go through the language in its current intensity, it's like a drug, basically. You go through it, you will be bored with slow teaching afterwards. After I did Ibn Jabal, when I went to Damascus, I had to, in order to sort of match the intensity that I got used to in Ibn Jabal, my day started 30 minutes before Fajr and ended 1 hour after Isha most days. From going from institute to institute to institute, because I just wanted more. And that's the kind of thing Ibn Jabal puts you in. You learn so much within a short space of time. You become, as the students would say, Ibn Jabalized, basically. You just want to learn more. And because you've been able to hack it once, you realize you can do it again. But it's not for everyone. Sorry, I've answered this too long. But not everyone can hack it. So why Ibn Jabal, I think, is the best out there. But it has its downsides in the sense that it's very intensive.
Yeah, and just to add, I'm not being paid for this. I think you mentioned Ibn Jabal does do taster courses, correct?
Yeah, yes.
So you can essentially, without making a long-term commitment, try it. I think it's a suggestion, for free, just to see if it is your cup of tea, inshallah. Okay.
I think so, like £10 actually. Yeah, £10. And then if you do the course, it goes towards your course.
Okay, inshallah.
Some are free. There are free taster sessions, and I think there's some other for £10. But I'm not part of the admin, unfortunately. I don't know much. So the admin are behind those.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is inshallah there'll be we'll sort of come to the pitch, but I think maybe at the end we'll have a quick 1-minute pitch with Angel, maybe not now. But there is a table at the back, inshallah, with a lot of volunteers. So if you do have any questions, then inshallah you can direct it there. Next question. Later, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm an Arabic teacher and I actually teach at universities. So my question is, out of curiosity, how long did it take you to learn Arabic as a communicative, like everyday life? And do you think that, like, besides talking about how important it is to understand Arabic, to be able to understand the Qur'an, we should also advocate that if you're actually investing time and effort in learning a language, why not have it as other functions, like speaking to Arab and having it in a business or everything? Because to learn a language, it's a long journey, but you don't want only to be able to read the Quran specifically. And also, if you say, I'm not very familiar with the program you do you do this side of the language as well? Thank you.
Okay, so the reason why, first of all, thank you for your question. The reason why we've limited the discussion around Arabic to the Quran in this session is because of the topic, the title is the relationship with the Quran and the Arabic language. Of course, learning the language has numerous advantages. And of course, when it comes to speaking, we teach what you will understand as Fusha, classical Arabic, which if you go to the Middle East and speak on the streets, they would either say Sadaqallahu al-Azim after you, or if it's a kid listening to you, they'll think you speak like a cartoon, because that's where they hear Fusha a lot. So it's good for business. We as a language, we teach Sadaqallahu al-Azim means Allah has spoken the truth. What you say after the Quran is recited. But usually, there are numerous advantages to learning a language, and I have seen the benefits, but everyone has a reason for learning the language. I learned Arabic personally because there's a verse in the Qur'an which says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى حَتَّى تَعْلَمُوا مَا تَقُولُونَ. It says, "O you who believe, don't approach prayer while you're drunk." Right? People say yes. But then why did it say that? So that you may know what you're saying. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute. I don't drink, never drunk. But I don't know what I'm saying. So what's the difference between me and a drunk person? Right? That for me was too baffling. I thought, I've got to learn this language. Right? A drunk person will not know what they're saying. And someone who doesn't understand what they're saying is just saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, doesn't understand the rhetoric force that comes with such a statement. Right? So that's the reason. Of course, there are numerous advantages, but I learned it for the sake of the Qur'an, which is why when I teach it, when I talk about it, it's pretty much centered around the Qur'an. I couldn't work in an office with Arabic personally because I don't have the vocabulary to speak in an office. I couldn't be a politician in Arabic because I don't have the vocabulary to speak about politics. I only have the vocabulary for Qur'an, for religious stuff, personally. But of course, as a language, so you also asked me about my own personal journey. I was at UCL in second year with my very close friend here. We're both sidekicks, they used to call us. But you won't believe it, but I know. In my second year, I got an email saying, learn Arabic in 3 weeks. Right? Being a Nigerian that loves shortcuts, I thought, wow, right? I thought 3 weeks, let's go for it, right? But little did I know that was going to be a journey. If anybody told me then that, oh, you're going to be teaching it one day, I would laugh out loud I would say, right? I never saw myself in this position that I'm in right now. But so my journey, I learned after I did the course in my second year at UCL. I did a 3-week course. Then the second part of that 3 weeks was to actually go to Syria. I couldn't travel at that time, so I did the 3-week course again. After doing the 3-week course again, I thought, oh my God, it just keeps getting better because I had 2 different teachers and I got 2 different things, and I thought, I did the same thing, I got a lot here, I'm here again, it's as if I've not even done it before, and I'm getting so much more. And after that, then I did the level 2 course over a year at Ibn what's it called? With Ibn Jabal level 2, we did it over a year. And also in my 3rd year module, I chose a module at SOAS in Arabic. And when they asked us and interviewed us, they said, how much Arabic do you know? I said, yeah, I did this 3-week Arabic course twice. And they said, oh, okay, come, you were right. Little did they know that those 3 weeks was much more than what I learned in that module. And it was my only 80% in the whole degree. Right? The only thing I actually got more than 80% in. Yeah, I didn't fail, but anyway. So in all, that's my impression. And then after doing that, after my degree, between my degree and my master's, his parents paid for my trip to go to Syria for 3 months. That's why we're back close. Anyway, they paid for my trip to go to Syria for 3 months. And in that 3 months, I learned at the University of Damascus. I learned at another institute. I sat down with the gate man of Abu Nur to learn grammar. I had shuyukh that I sat down with to learn tajweed from. I basically wanted to pull as much in Arabic as I could in those 3 months. After coming back from that, then I could speak Arabic. And then in 2005, I got a call from one of my teachers saying, I want you to teach. Because it's rude to laugh at your teachers, I thought it was joking. I thought, I've never taught anyone before, I've never taught anything before, why do you want me to teach? He said, seriously, I think you should try it. And he told me his story of how, before teaching me, he'd never taught anything as well before. And then he sort of realized that the true teacher is Allah. You're just the tool that he uses in spite of your imperfection. But anyway, then I took that and I started teaching in 2005. And from then, I've not really looked back. And there was a time where I thought to myself, I have students now who, I'm not exaggerating, who know a lot more Arabic than I do now. Or people that I've actually taught, even if it's just one class, like Ustad Badar, right? Who, I look at Arabic and I thought, Ya Rabbi, let me be like him. And So I thought to myself, I'm going to take a break from Arabic and go and learn. But in that break, 6 months, I didn't really learn anything. So I thought, okay, this is where I am. And so basically, I teach part-time in the weekends. But that's my own journey. How long did it take me to be able to speak? After the first, Ibn Jabal, I think you also asked that, does Ibn Jabal teach you how to speak? Ibn Jabal is mainly focused on you understanding the language. But let me give you a journey that I've seen, not 1, not 2, not 10, numerous students take. If you do a level 1 Ibn Jabal course, right, and I've seen many people do it, including some of my brothers, if you do a level 1 Ibn Jabal course, 15 lessons, and you go to the middle, you're equipped with the tools to make sentences, okay, comfortably to express yourself. And you go to the Middle East for 2 to 3 months, right, you come back speaking Arabic fluently. And people will ask you, how many years have you been learning? I'm not, this is people, I've seen enough people do this to say that this happens. If you do a level 2, level 1 and level 2, you would go to Middle East, and between 1 or 2 months, or 1.5 months max of being in the Middle East, you will come back speaking fluently. Because the courses empower you to be able to make sentences, and immersion gives you the best environments to make those sentences, where you have to speak, otherwise, the person, selling you bread will not understand what price is this, basically. So, in my experience, that's the balance. But we don't, Ibn Jabal as an institute doesn't, for now, teach speaking. It's something we might do in the future, but the whole purpose of it was to really get people, to give them a tool to really understand this language, and actually also understand their religion and understand what this is, so that nobody can, sell them porkies regarding what their religion preaches. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Just something actually you alluded to, which is also another benefit, which is actually access to the people. There are a lot of, Jubril talked about speaking to the gay person out of Noor and stuff. There are a lot of people with so much knowledge who don't speak English, simply put, and they are just closed to you if you don't have access to the Arabic language. So that's also one reason. I think it's, if you're going down the sort of religious route, why it's, I think, essential. Next question, please.
I'll try and make the answer brief this time.
Unless it's only one question, then you might as well talk. Okay, we've got
Assalamu alaikum. My question is that, essentially I've just finished the level 1 Ibn Jabal course, and alhamdulillah I've gained a lot from it, but really what I need to do now is continue to apply the Arabic to make the most of it. But my question is, when you go back to the Qur'an and you try and translate it, how do you know that the interpretation you are getting from, trying to make sense of the meaning is a correct interpretation? Is there such thing as a correct and an incorrect interpretation of the Qur'an?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the answer. There are many levels of interpreting the Qur'an, and one of which is linguistic analysis. Okay, there are many, many levels of the interpretation. There is what we call, there are sciences of the Qur'an. There's what we call asbab al-nuzul, causes of revelation, which if you don't know the causes of revelation, your interpretation of the verse can be wrong. There are also things like knowing the context. The asbab al-nuzul gives you the context of revelation. From a linguistic analysis, however, as long as you have to, at level 1, right, you can literally have a literal translation of the Qur'an, but you can't taste the Qur'an yet. The tool you need in the Arabic language to taste the Qur'an, which will give you that ability to interpret it, right? And even that ability you have to interpret it, your interpretation might differ from another person, and you can both be right, right? The tool that will give you that is called balagha, is rhetoric in the Arabic language, right? When you learn the science, and that's taught in Ibn Jabal level 3, right? And you basically learn what subhanAllah, I can't summarize balagha in 1 minute, but you learn the different styles of expression, right? I'll give you an example. In the Quran, Allah says, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, right? In Surah Al-Imran, the wife of the sister of Imran complains, the wife of Imran mentions that رَبِّ إِنِّي وَضَعْتُهَا أُنْثَى, oh Allah, I've given birth to a girl. وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا وَضَعَتْ, and Allah knows best what I've given birth to. And then Allah responds to her, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى. And the male is not like the female. That's the translation. Now, you hear that, you translate that, what's the first thing that comes to your head? You think the male is not like the female. Does that mean the male is better? Right? Is that what you think? When you learn the Arabic language, you understand the concept of tashbih, right? In balagha. When you learn, you understand the concept of similes. And you know that in balagha, in similes, you have something that you're comparing and the thing you're comparing it to. And you always know that as a basic form of balagha, the thing that you're comparing it to is always better than the thing you're comparing. So for example, if I say he is as courageous as a lion, we know that the lion is more courageous, or he is like the lion. He is like a lion. We know that the lion is more courageous, or is much more fierce, but we say he's like that. So the thing compared to is the lion. Or his face is as bright as the moon. We know that the moon is brighter, but his face is like the moon. Similarly, the thing being compared to in the Arabic language here is the untha, is the female. So when you learn balagha, you're under no assumption. You know that it's the female that is being magnified in this verse. And not, you can't think anywhere else. Because you said, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى, like the Arabic, مُشَبَّهٌ بِهِ. Right? Is the thing that you're comparing it to. Now, if you have only learned level 1, you will say, and the male is not like the female. Right? When you think, okay, you have a bit of a doubt there. But when you learn the ability to taste the Qur'an, then you know, oh my God. Right? Then you see what is really being into. And the Qur'an is filled with. So, in short, yes, you can be wrong, or there is, but it doesn't mean, with your journey with the Qur'an, Allah has promised, وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَانَ. This is a promise of Allah, and it's a conditional sentence. Whoever strives for us, we will definitely, surely guide them to our paths. So that your little striving of trying to translate, Allah would guide you to His path so that you will eventually be right. Allah, Wallahu a'lam. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you just comment on the relationship between interpretation, as the brothers asked, and ijtihad, the process of ijtihad?
I don't know. I must say, no, this is not a disclaimer, this is a statement of fact. I'm an IT consultant by trade. That's what I spend most of my time doing. I know you said, why didn't you say that when you talk about Arabic? But that's, Arabic happens to be my passion. And maybe I'll do it full time if it pays the bills. But I do it part time, and I've been doing it for all these years. But I don't consider myself an alim, a scholar. I'm a student of other students of knowledge. So ijtihad is something the scholars speak about, which I can only hear them speak about. I don't have the knowledge to comment on ijtihad. Arabic language, it gives you an ability, if you learn it to a certain level, it gives you an ability to have an opinion, but ijtihad is something else. Something proper. I don't know, basically.
Yeah, again, something I heard is that language is a precursor to ijtihad, so there's no ijtihad without a grasp of language. So if you look at all the sort of fuqaha, they had sort of their language was, actually very strong. So without sort of a very, very firm grasp of language, then it's a different science. So you need language before you can move to the other door. Inshallah, question in front, inshallah.
Two quick questions. Firstly, have you, has Jubril done any work with the Darulooms up and down the country, given that they're trying to do, I guess, a similar type of thing? And the second thing was that for those of us that haven't got the time or the strength to essentially do 15 weeks of intensive course, there are some books that I guess that can explain some of the things that you've gone through. You've explained some of it in this lecture, so it's possible. Professor Halim's an example of his kind of a lot of examples that book that reminded me of what you're saying. Are there any others that you recommend?
So the question is, are there any books that I'd recommend? I can't think of the books that I would recommend are in Arabic. I basically, people who know me know that when they tell me anything, I ask for the Arabic version. Because I feel I'm cheated when I'm deprived from the Arabic. So I don't read many religious things in English or many things about Arabic in English anymore. I bought one, Rhetoric in the Arabic Language. It's a blue book. I've forgotten who wrote it. It's someone in, was it Holland? In the north. It was a professor in the north. I started reading it, but I just felt slightly cheated. So I went back to Al-Balaghat al-Wadiha. You know, the book on Balagha, which you find a lot more in it. But, I mean, if you cannot read, if you cannot learn Arabic to a very deep extent, then learn it to the extent that you can. Imam Shafi'i actually considers it fard ayn to learn the Arabic language. He considers it that it's compulsory upon every sane, able Muslim to learn the Arabic language. Why? Because Allah says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not ponder over the Qur'an, or are their hearts sealed? That is, that's the condition, that's the consequence of not pondering over the Qur'an, basically. So he said, because of that, then it becomes mandatory upon everyone to learn that language to the best of their ability. That's the question. Oh, yes, sorry. Second part, Darul Ulum question. Actually, I have had a lot of students in the past that have been sent to us by Darul. I don't know the name specifically, I don't remember, but I have had at least 6 that I remember. Amazing, amazing students. I love them. So, and I feel slightly jealous of them because they do my classes, and in 4 or 5 years, they're shuyukh that I feel I want to learn from, basically. And I've had one of them, Ma'ruf is one of them. But basically, yes, they do. What they do is they send them to us. They do our level 1 and 2 courses, and then they go to the Middle East. But the time they need to spend in the Middle East, because they've done our courses, is much, much shorter, basically. I don't remember the name, but I know at least 2 different Darul Ulum that regularly send their students to us.
Time for maybe 2 more shortish questions, inshallah. Mohammed, you were going to ask before. Do you want to ask?
Sure, I do. Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick one, hopefully. Maybe there won't be an answer tonight, but and I think you touched upon it. But what would you say to someone who would say, if the Qur'an is for the whole of humankind, why is it revealed in Arabic and in Arabia? It's a devil's advocate question. Thank you.
The Qur'an describes itself as a hudan linnas, that as a guidance for the whole of mankind. It declares that it is that, right? But everybody can access the Qur'an at different levels. There is a level of access in it without necessarily understanding it. You still benefit from it, right? You still benefit from it from a spiritual perspective. Why? Because the Prophet Muhammad said, whoever recites 1 harf of the Qur'an will get 10 rewards. And I don't say Bismillah is an harf, I don't say Alhamdulillah is an harf, but Alif is a harf, Lam is a harf, and Ha is a harf. So yes, by just reading it, you'll benefit from it. But you know, there is a verse in Zephaniah that says that towards the end of time in the Bible, that towards the end of time, God will choose a language, right, a purified language to be His means of communication, right. From what Muslims believe, that the Quran is a guidance for people, but at the same time, yes, it might have been revealed there, and but the Prophet Muhammad, if you look at his seerah, he sent people to all the world. Right? He sent people to cover the whole world. And he gave, what he would do, he would select someone from the tribe or from a group of people and teach that person and then send the person back as teachers. Okay? So it is a guidance for mankind. It is a guidance for everyone, but it depends on the level at which you want to interact with it. If you want to be intellectually stimulated by it, you have to learn the language. If you want, and as I said, not everyone will be an Arabic scholar, right? Not everybody will be an Arabic grammarian. But trust me, if you knew the benefits of understanding this language, you would fight wars over understanding this language and what you will get from it. Like the poet said, you know, لَوْ يَعْلَمَ الْمُلُوكِ, if the kings knew what knowledge had, they will fight wars over knowledge rather than over petty wealth.